antitrust and healthcare intersect. And a large part of why healthcare and antitrust intersect, the antitrust laws are meant to preserve competition. Much of healthcare is local. Your hospitals are local. You can't travel 500 miles to go to a cheaper hospital. Your doctor is local.
This is Tom Fox. In October, Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco gave a keynote speech at the American Bar Association's 36th National Institute on White-Collar Crime. Her remarks reframed a discussion about the uses of, reason for, and perceptions on independent monitors and monitorships. Monaco's remarks should be studied by every compliance professional as they portend a very large change in the way the Department of Justice will use monitors going forward. Over this 5-part podcast series, sponsored by Affiliated Monitors, we will consider why Monaco's remarks herald a new era for monitorships. In other words, it is not your father's monitor. We will look at change in monitorships from the white-collar enforcement and defense perspective from Bethany Hengsbach. Mikhail Reider Gordon will look at the global aspects of new DOJ monitor focus. Cristina Revelo will discuss how ethics and compliance assessments help drive more compliant companies. Jesse Caplan brings his views on the twin topics of antitrust and healthcare compliance. And in part 5, we conclude with Affiliated Monitors founder Vin DiCianni, who looks at where monitors and monitorships are going in 2022 and beyond. First, a word about our sponsor, Affiliated Monitors. Founded in 2004, Affiliated Monitors was the first company in the United States to focus on providing top-quality, independent integrity monitoring and assessment services across a wide range of regulated industries and professions. What distinguishes AMI professionals from others is that monitoring is AMI's business. It is not a sideline to some other professional practice or service. AMI has been the corporate integrity monitor for more than 850 matters, involving large multinational companies and individual practitioners. For more information, check out their website, www.affiliatedmonitors.com. In this penultimate episode 4, I visit with Jesse Caplan, Managing Director at Affiliated Monitors, and we take a look at the intersection of antitrust and healthcare compliance. This podcast series is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back for another episode of Not Your Father's Monitor. Today, I have with me Jesse Caplan from Affiliated Monitors. Jesse, first of all, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Yeah, well, it's nice to be back with you, Tom, and I'm looking forward to this.
Jesse, as you know, we're focused on, as a starting point, Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco's speech back in October around part of the speech dealt with monitorships. And I really saw 3 key components of her remarks around monitors, and I wanted to use that as an introduction to ask you about your specialties of antitrust and healthcare. What I saw was, number one, that monitors are not viewed by the Department of Justice as punitive and should not be viewed by the compliance community or wider corporate community as punitive. 2, that the department sees monitors as a tool allowing the DOJ to extend their reach to help companies fulfill their obligations in any settlement agreement, whatever form that might take, and also to frankly act as perhaps an early tripwire to prevent companies from sliding into a recidivist situation. And from my perspective, number 3 is that monitors bring a level of skill and talent around compliance programs and corporate culture that they can help companies create a best practices program so that the monitor actually works with the companies or company under the enforcement action to help them create a program that's going to be sustainable far down the road. So with that somewhat long-winded introduction, how did you see the Monaco speech, and how did the issues that you see in healthcare and antitrust really lend themselves to one or all of those approaches?
Right. Well, Tom, I think you hit the nail right on the head as to what the key takeaways from the Lisa Monaco speech, and they're important takeaways. And so let me first address kind of your first observation that monitors should not be viewed as punitive. And I'm gonna address that by telling you a little bit about why I became a monitor, because I absolutely feel that is the right view and role of a monitor. It's not to be punitive, but to facilitate a successful compliance program, a successful settlement agreement that works for both the government and for the company, and they both are come out better at the end as a result. So, I've been a lawyer. I've only been a monitor now for about 3.5 years, but I've been a lawyer for over 30 years, and I have practiced both in the private sector, representing companies, large companies, particularly in the healthcare space. I've also been an enforcer, working for the Department of Justice, as well as the Massachusetts Attorney General's Office in investigating and in times prosecuting antitrust and other types of cases. And I've also been a regulator, where I was the general counsel for the Massachusetts Executive Office of Health and Human Services, which oversaw, for instance, the Massachusetts Medicaid program and I think 12 different Health and Human Services agencies. So when I joined AMI, I came to it with what I felt was a really varied experience, and having a appreciation for what government enforcers are looking for, what the goals are government regulators are, but also some of the challenges and goals of companies who, for the most part, want to be successful and to do so in a compliant and fair manner. So when I met with, for instance, Vin DiCianni, who's the founder of Affiliated, and some of the other principals about potentially joining Affiliated, it was very important to me as to what the philosophy of the firm was. And the philosophy of the firm was not that monitors should be punitive, that we don't play got you. Instead, the philosophy was that we take a remedial approach, with the idea that when a government agency and a company agree to conditions and enter into a settlement agreement and agree to a monitor, that everyone is invested that be successful at the end of the day. And a good monitor, an effective monitor, can help facilitate that settlement agreement is successful. We actually, to a large extent, we serve as a bridge between the government agency and the company being monitored. And that fit right with my values and my experiences to what makes these types of things successful.
Jesse, if I could turn now to the types of monitorships that you have been involved with at AMI. And I found it interesting, kind of the breadth and scope of your monitorships, but it's frankly based upon the breadth and scope of your professional practice and background. And that's both in healthcare and antitrust. And one of the things that has struck me in the antitrust world is that you can have a monitor for literally the biggest case there you can imagine, but you can also have a monitorship for specific issues and narrowly focused. And I was wondering if you could give a few thoughts about how you've seen a independent integrity monitor really help on what might be a narrow or even esoteric antitrust issue, but you utilize properly by everyone involved, the regulators and both companies going forward.
As you mentioned, Tom, my area of practice, or areas of practice, include antitrust and healthcare, and that's not by coincidence. Antitrust and healthcare really do intersect, and a large part of why healthcare and antitrust intersect is that the antitrust laws are meant to preserve competition, and much of healthcare is local. Your hospitals are local. You can't travel 500 miles to go to a cheaper hospital. Your doctor is local. So competition, and there is competition in healthcare, competition between hospitals, competition between physicians, that is all local. And whenever you have local competition, there is a greater potential for antitrust issues. That could be potential antitrust issues involving things like collusion between the local participants in the healthcare industry, or it could be as a result of mergers and acquisitions. So whenever hospitals in a local market merge, there's going to be an antitrust or a competitive impact. The question then is that competitive impact such that it will actually potentially reduce competition and then require the government to take action and then potentially impose a monitor if there are conditions imposed. So in terms of the type of monitorships I've been involved in the antitrust field, and particularly in the healthcare antitrust field, there really, one area has been a focus on mergers and acquisitions of hospitals or vertically integrated, where there might be physicians along with hospitals, where the enforcement agency, whether it's federal or state enforcement agencies like the Attorney General's office, feel that in order to allow a particular merger to go forward, there have to be conditions. And those conditions may actually require a divestiture of one of the assets so that there maintains competition in that market. The other area are what we call conduct cases, where there are allegations that a participant in the market has market power or monopoly power, means they can unilaterally basically raise prices because there's a lack of competition. And where enforcement agencies have brought cases and settled those where there are conditions to mitigate against that participant using or abusing its monopoly or market power. And we've been brought in to monitor that market participant is complying with those conditions, with the ultimate goal by the regulators as well as the market participants that there maintains a robust competitive market. And just quickly, what does it mean to have a competitive market, and what are the benefits of a competitive market? The competitive market and the benefits are that you have a competition on price, so it lowers price. You have competition on quality, so that you have the best quality. And you also have competition on innovation, where market participants will compete each other to come up with a new best way or better way to efficiently offer services. So those are the kind of the monitoring matters that I've been involved in since I've been with affiliated monitors.
Just let me now focus a little bit more on healthcare. One of my observations in interviewing you for podcasts and working with you over the years and your colleagues at affiliated monitors is that people in the healthcare profession, whether it's a regulator, whether it's a service provider, whether it's a legal resource, you're all passionate about healthcare, and you're passionate about delivering healthcare and making sure that there's always healthcare available. And that you've been able to utilize the monitorship and monitor role to really help in that, if I could say, overriding mission for delivering of healthcare benefits literally to every person in the United States. So I was wondering if you could really give us a few thoughts on why the monitorship role may work even more uniquely in the healthcare space when there has been a violation other than anti-competitiveness.
Yeah, so you raise a really good point, Tom. For the vast majority of participants in the healthcare industry, their goal, they're mission oriented, and their goal is to deliver quality, cost-effective healthcare and keep people healthy. The challenge in the healthcare industry, though, is that so much of the revenue that comes to healthcare participants, the companies that provide services, so much of that revenue comes from either the federal or state government through the Medicare system, through the Medicaid system, through other government-sponsored healthcare programs. And as you know, whenever you are participating in government programs and getting your revenues from the government, state or federal, there are really important and strict rules you have to apply, and you have to have a very strong compliance program so that you don't get tripped up, even with the best of intention, that you don't get tripped up and be found liable for a violation of the anti-kickback statute or STAR or worse, the False Claims Act. So where do monitors come in? When we talk about monitors, there's really two things we do as monitors. There's what I'll call the reactive, where a company enters into a settlement agreement, and then we're called upon to monitor that they're complying with that settlement agreement. But there's also something else that we're doing more and more, particularly in healthcare, and that is what we call proactive monitoring, or doing proactive assessments of compliance programs. And this is particularly important in the healthcare space, that companies kick the tires on their compliance programs before they're being investigated, or sometimes while they're being investigated, but before they have to enter into a settlement agreement, so that they can be in a stronger position to either, one, prevent a potential compliance violation that lands them in hot water, or two, if they have committed a compliance violation, so that they can then convince the government agency that the problem that they have, the compliance problem they have, is not because they don't have a strong compliance program, but it's despite the fact they have a strong compliance program. And if they can convince the government regulator, enforcer of that, then they can get much more lenient treatment when it comes to ultimately entering into a settlement agreement. And we do both of that, and we're doing more and more of that in the healthcare field.
Jesse, you also work with regulators and regulatory agencies that are not in the federal government, and I specifically point you to some state regulators. What are you seeing in the evolution of thinking of state regulators around monitors?
Yes. So as I think you mentioned earlier, so monitors can really be a resource extender for government agencies, and particularly enforcement agencies. And some of the state attorney general's offices have realized this for quite a long time. And we've done a lot of work, for instance, with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, particularly with their Medicaid fraud control division. But more and more state attorney generals are seeing that when they enter a settlement agreement with conditions, rather than continue to apply their own resources to make sure that that company is complying with the conditions, they can require that a monitor be appointed to verify that the company is complying with those conditions. And we're seeing that more and more in states across the country. And frankly, we hope to see more, not just because it may mean more business for us, but we really think that's a really important tool that enforcement agencies, particularly ones at the state level who have less resources typically than the federal government, that they can take advantage of. And there's another point as well, and this is something that I found in my 3+ years as a monitor. As a monitor, we are independent, and we consider ourselves kind of an honest broker. As I mentioned, we can be a bridge between the company and the regulator. And what we find is we can actually facilitate, as I mentioned before, we can facilitate successful kind of operation and then termination of a monitorship. And we can do that because we can have candid conversations with both the company, separately with the company, and a candid conversation separately with the government, so that we can better understand where there might be disconnect between the two. And then we can help connect so that there's not misunderstandings or different expectations that end up sometimes torpedoing a settlement agreement. To the contrary, by having those conversations, by serving as that bridge, we can help prevent problems and have problems addressed so that ultimately the monitorship is successful. And I've seen that. I've been part of that process in many monitors in the 3 years that I've been with affiliated monitors.
Well, Jesse, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I wanted to thank you for taking the time to visit with me, and I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Tom. Have a great holiday.
This is Tom Fox again. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you'll join us in our next episode where Affiliated Monitors founder Vin DiCianni wraps the series up together and takes a look at where monitors and monitorships are going in 2022 and beyond. You can check out more on Affiliated Monitors by looking at their website, www.affiliatedmonitors.com. This special podcast series, Not Your Father's Monitors, has been a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.